Let's look at in the book on page number 29. Page 29. And when you're ready, say, I'm ready. The characteristics of stress. We are hard pressed on every side, but not crushed. Perplexed, but not in despair. Persecuted, but not abandoned. Struck down, but not destroyed. That comes from 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 8 and 9. Now, at the beginning of this, turning the page to page 30, she always uses Abraham Lincoln as a reference. I'm going to trust that you've already read that. I just want to look down here at the 4 stages of stress. Today, we all have varying amounts of stress. Contrary to what many think, a moderate amount of stress can be helpful. For a student, the moderate stress of an exam typically provides motivation to study. Likewise, with no homework to turn in and no regular test to take, many students would be unmotivated to study. But if there's too much stress, the possibility of burnout is ever present. The following describes the 4 stages of stress. They are stage 1. Read it with me. No. Stage 2, green light. Stage 3, yellow light. And finally, red light, stage 4. It's burnout. Movement stops and repair is necessary. A moderate amount of stress can be helpful. Too much stress can cause burnout. A moderate amount of stress can be helpful. Is that true? It motivates you. In what ways does it motivate you? It motivates you not to be stressed. To meet deadlines. It sets boundaries for your time and your energy. You can look at life in a different perspective. Okay. Anybody else? Last week we talked about this a little bit. They called it positive stress. Positive stress. Family can be positive stress. Church can be positive stress. Work can be positive stress. Yeah. And here, reading the verse that she has listed, Psalm 120, verse 1, I called on the Lord in my distress, and he answers me. Question, does stress tend to motivate you or immobilize you? I told you I'd do this before y'all got here. Does it motivate you or immobilize you? It can do both. It can do both. And sometimes when we feel like there are certain things that we have no control over, that can be a kind of frustrating stress where you give up on stuff. So it can do both. It says read Psalm 120 and 1, which we just read, and write down the first step you should take when facing a stressful situation. He said, David said, I called on the Lord, and he answered me. We start with prayer. One of the other things is praise. Praise. Sometimes we wait till we get through something to thank God for certain things. But if you know the Lord is with you and you know that your situation is going to be rectified, why would you wait to praise God until you got through a situation? Sometimes you have to praise your way through a situation. All right. Sometimes with teardrops, you still got to claim joy. Sometimes in the midst of sickness, you still got to claim health. Sometimes in the middle of financial trouble, you still have to declare that the Lord will supply all of my needs. And even if in your present predicament that you can't really feel praising God is appropriate, all you got to do is look back with what the Lord has already done for you. Sometimes you have to look at your past so that you can deal with your present. And if you realize God has always been with me, God has been my help in days past. And if he is my help in days past, he's with me right now. So it doesn't matter what happens external to me, internal and eternally, I know that God is on my side and there's nothing that you and he can't take care of together. Now, what characterizes the stages of stress? She gives me some more Abe Lincoln. I'm going right past that. I'm going down here to the bottom of page 33 where it says, my guilt has overwhelmed me like a burden too heavy to bear. That's Psalms 38:4. Let's look at the stages of stress and some of the characteristics of the various stages. Stage 1, no light. With insufficient stress to encourage an individual to act responsibly, you will find that that person does what? And 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 what? Now I'm gonna share this with you. Everybody that has a short temper it's not because they don't have stress. Some folk just mean. Some folk just mean. That's just the way they are. But do you see anything in stage 1 that is characteristic of any stage of your pilgrimage? Have you ever lived stress-free and got lazy? It has no energy? All right. You're stress-free. When you stress-free, do you have a lot of energy? Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. But what I think Ms. Hunt is saying in this is, and that has to do with stress as motivation. What she's saying, where there is no stress, none, all right, there is no desire to move. No desire to move. You know, folks start living at ease in Zion when everything going your way. Look, I bet you don't pray as hard when you don't have any stress. Huh? And that's a good observation. She says, when is it that you don't have stress? I don't know. I've never lived. Maybe when you're a child, but they got issues too. There's no stress. Mm-hmm. You wish you could stay in that place. All right, let's go to stage 2, the green light. Positive stress pushes you to proper maintenance. When there is sufficient positive stress, you will find that a person does what? And what? And has what? And what? And what? And what? And what? And what? And see, what she seems to be indicating is this is the stage that you want to be in. to where, you know, there's stress that moves and motivates you to do certain things. Do certain things. Because everything that she lists here is positive. It is, yes. Yes, it is the obverse of one. You face responsibility. So it's not as if you can't handle it. You feel like you can handle some things. And sometimes you may not be able to deal with everything, but you can do something. That you have responsible relationships. That you're productive. You got energy. You have energy. You have energy. You experience peace. Anybody in a peaceful place? See, that's what you were talking about in prayer. You in your peaceful place. All right. And you have a fulfillment of purpose. Yes, that life becomes fulfilling. Fulfilling. You know, sometimes even in pain, pain can have purpose. And if there's a purpose in your pain, you can still be fulfilled while you're dealing with pain. Miles Jones used to tell us when people understand purpose, they may stub their toe. But if they see God in it, they'll stub it with joy. They stub it with joy. You have a positive perspective. I don't like to spend a whole lot of time with folks that are always negative. It gets in your spirit, and you internalize that stuff, and it will make you a negative person. You want to be positive, hang around positive people. All right? If you want to lose weight, hang around skinny people. No, seriously, you don't want to hang around with a whole lot of fat folk when you're trying to lose weight. They ain't lost nothing. Anyway, all right. Stage 3, yellow light. The warning signs of stress are like the amber lights on a traffic signal. They caution you to be on the alert, to slow down, to be prepared for the upcoming change. The following are physical warning signs of stress. They are what? And high blood pressure. Help me, somebody. Hyper alertedness, anxiousness, restlessness, weight gain or loss, loss of sleep or excessive sleep, lack of concentration, constant worrying, indecisiveness, poor judgment, irritability, and agitation. And it's real interesting that these are the physical symptoms of stress. But you know that stress can get you sick? It can get you sick. I don't know if I shared this with you on last week, but when I first came to seminary, the first year I was in seminary, and I had been working my behind off to get to seminary. I was EEO. I was taking extra courses in undergrad, and I was also pastoring the church. And I got here, entered into school, and I'd only been in school 3 months, and I started having chest pains, and I had no idea where they were coming from. And they did all these heart tests to find out what was wrong with me, and everything was fine. And the doctor asked me about what I had been doing over the last year. When I shared with him what I had been doing, he says, this is stress. This is stress. Stress can make you sick. And that's why you have to be very, very cognizant of the warning signs of certain things. And not only yourself, but you need to be aware of those around you who may be dealing with issues like that. Positive stress pushes you to proper maintenance, is what she said at the bottom of the page. But on the next page, she talks about red light, stage 4. Burnout is not God's will for you. It may just be the way be that you have not processed the stresses of life in a godly way. Instead of living at stage 2, a person becomes what? Overwhelmed by responsibility, withdrawn from relationships, minimally productive, easily fatigued, nervous, depressed, lack of enthusiasm, moody, purposelessness, disinterested in sex, disinterested in sex, without perspective but with erratic eating and sleeping patterns, impatient, easily angered. Easily angered. Have you ever been in that stage where you were overwhelmed? When we built the Grace Center, that was good stress until we got the last brick up and had to start paying for stuff. And it stressed me out, worrying about making sure the bills were paid on that. It stressed me out. My daughter said to me, look, I think I told you this. She said, you always preach about faith. Why don't you have any? Why are you worried about stuff? And I said, shut up. No, I did. All right, and here it says right from the heart. Which stage of stress do you most identify with in this season of your life? No light? That's the first stage. Huh? Well, that ain't the first stage in the book, but overwhelmed by responsibility. Now that's stage 4. That's burnout stage. That is exactly right. A combination, or let me put it to you like this: all of us at one time or another probably go through all 4 of these stages at some time in our pilgrimage. Yes, Lori. Mm-hmm. 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 Well, you bring up something that's very important in 2 respects. One, i- if you are always myopically focused on your own situation, you can always find a reason to complain. If all you'd see is and all of us, I'm just like right now, I'm dealing with these glasses things because I used to make fun of my cousin because he always had to pull out glasses when we were out to eat and that kind of thing. He said, just stay around here a little while. But all I'm saying is that everybody got something they can point at. So one of the ways in which that you can get beyond that is not just concentrating on you, but concentrating on others around you. Because when you help others, in many ways you're helping yourself. You're helping yourself. The second thing that Lori brought up, which is very important, I will ask you a question related to it. When you have stress, how do you deal with it? In other words, when you're going through, how do you get the kind of support that you need to make it through it? Hmm. Anybody else want to help us in terms of how you deal with stress? Hmm. 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 Do you have someone that you can talk to when you're going through what you're going through? Because some of us, um, we rely on the wrong things or the wrong people. I was sharing with Connie Glass on Monday. I said, I'm glad that you weren't at church on Sunday because I know how hurt you were, and folk mean well. All right, but folks say the wrong stuff. They say the wrong stuff. It was in God's will. Now wait a minute. What you saying about God? What you say about God? Is in God's will that your husband suddenly died? No, no. When my grandmother died, I almost lost it at church when somebody came up to me and said, my grandmother was in God's hands and this was in God's will, and I almost fussed them out uh, because I was fussing with God. I was fussing with God. Matter of fact, I told the Lord, if you would heal my grandmother, I'll preach. I knew He was calling me to preach. I knew from the time I was a teenager I was called to preach. But I told Him, if you heal my grandmother, I'd start preaching. And you know what the Lord said to me? I don't need you. I don't need you. But you understand, I was fussing with God, and then folk are blaming God for my grandmother's death. Just say the wrong things. That's why you ought to have more ear than tongue. Sometimes you just need to be there to listen. And let me take this a step further, and I mentioned this on yesterday. Black folk don't take mental health issues seriously. We really don't. We stigmatize folk that may have real problems, and we don't take advantage of therapists, because it's good to have somebody not just to listen to you, but guide the discussion so you can come to certain resolutions. Everybody needs somebody. All right, everybody needs somebody, but you don't need to just run to every Jamal and Jacqueline. Sometimes you need to talk to somebody professionally. Help me, somebody. And then the other thing is, some of us are dealing with chemical imbalances in the brain. And you could actually get a whole lot of relief if you ever got medical attention to deal with it. But we like to talk down or think that we can handle stuff all by ourselves. We think that going through something by ourselves makes us strong. That doesn't make you strong. That makes you weak. It makes you weak, and it's going to wear you out eventually. It's going to wear you out. It's going to wear you out. You're going to have high blood pressure. You may even leave the planet. It'll put you in stage 4 and maybe even stage 5. Maybe even stage 5. So at this point, I'm going to ask Reverend Graves to come forward and share with you. We're dealing with burnout and the biblical response. On next week, session number 3. Make sure you look over it before we come to class. All right, I'm going to get my wife something to eat. Make sure that she's straight. All right, I have selfish motives for doing that. Yeah, because when I'm sick, I want her to take care of me.
All right, so we're going to skip to page 39, and we're going to deal with burnout. And first of all, good evening. All right, burnout. Now, I don't know if y'all read it or not. That was our assignment, but I'll go ahead and read it anyway. It says, Lincoln was committed to honor and integrity. His turbulent emotions concerning the breakup with Mary Todd can be traced in part to the gravity of a matrimonial contract in 19th century America. Legally binding, the rejected party had the right to seek damages. Lincoln himself had successfully served as the attorney in a breach of promise suit. The weightiness of a marriage pledge in the mid-1800s may also have contributed to the fatal first of January 41. Now, if we go back a little bit at the beginning of this chapter, it talks about that. The significance of the January 41 thing. It's about January 1941. So I don't know why he, combined it like that. But that's all that's talking about. It says, following the breakup, Lincoln was in a cathartic state of self-analysis. He lost confidence in his ability to maintain resolve since he hadn't followed through and married Mary Todd. He wrote to his longtime friend Joshua Speed, I must regain my confidence in my own ability to keep my resolves when they are made. In that ability, I once prided myself as the only, or at least the chief, gem of my character. That gem I lost. How and when, you too well know. I have not yet regained it, and until I do, I cannot trust myself in any matter of much importance. Lincoln ended up marrying Mary Todd on November the 4th, 1842. One observer noted, he looked and acted as if he were going to the slaughter. Now, can you imagine that? That's like I guess that was probably one of the first shotgun weddings, or at least he felt like that. All right, so it says the checklist for burnout. First of all, when you hear the word burnout, what do you think? What comes to your mind when you hear the word burnout? You said through, okay. 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 Too much to handle, all right. And overworked. You can't think straight. Overwhelmed, all right. I'm sorry? Mind blown. Mind blown. At the bottom of page 39, it says a checklist for burnout. The following checklist can help you identify the levels of stress in your life. Put a check mark next to the statements that currently apply to you. And if we turn to page 40 and 41, it gives us a checklist. That's a long checklist, but it breaks it up in 3 different sections. First, you have your emotional symptoms. It says, I am plagued with guilt over not being as responsible, as committed as I should be. So what I want you to do for maybe a minute and a half is go down those lists. And you don't have to physically check it, but check the ones that you think apply to you. All right, so real quick. All right, I'm going to stop you real quick. So have y'all done the emotional and physical symptoms? Y'all done those too? All right. So the emotional, I'm going to just pick out a few. Like one says, I feel depressed. That's a big one. Because like Pastor Gray said a few minutes ago, sometimes we let the stigma of depression, because depression is serious. My oldest brother, that a few years ago, I don't know if you all know, but my oldest brother committed suicide. Right? He was my oldest brother, and we thought that he was we looked at him as, our strength. And that happened maybe like a month or 6 months after my father had passed away. And it was weird because his wife had gone to the hospital for hip replacement surgery. And when it was time for her to be discharged, she called us and said that he hadn't come to pick her up that morning. So her son went and got her. So for maybe like a month, nobody knew where he was. So they had put a missing persons report out on him. Well, after those months, we got a phone call that they had found his truck behind the Walmart down. He lived in Hampton. They had found his truck at the Walmart. He had killed himself. And you always ask the question, why? Or what caused that? And and I believe that because he was the older brother, that he felt that maybe he couldn't come to us. That's why it's important, like Pastor was saying, that everybody, because I saw something today that says everybody needs a vent person. Everyone needs a vent person. Everyone needs somebody they can vent to. But you got to be careful with that, like he said, because you can't tell everybody everything. Because some people are just being nosy. A lot of people are not trying to help you. Some people just want to know what you're going through, but they don't have a solution for whatever you're going through. So you got to be careful with that. So the depression thing, that's, as he said, the mental health thing is real. And we tend to use that as a sign of weakness, or we think that makes us look weak. But we deal with that kind of stuff, so we have to, I guess, do better in how we handle it. Another one, let me see. How many of y'all ever felt hopeless? Hopeless or helpless, I think we've all felt confused once in a while, Sometimes we felt failure. If we let someone down, we can feel failure sometimes. So those are just some of the emotional symptoms that we deal with. How about the physical? The first one, it says, I am susceptible to every cold and virus. Or 2, I eat and snack excessively. I know a lot of people like that. And sometimes when people grind their teeth, that's their way of relieving stress. And then it says, on page 41, it just gives different symptoms and all. The spiritual symptoms. Apathetic towards Scripture. Right? Or how many times do we feel so stressed that we feel that, or we put more pressure on ourselves that we feel that we have to do more and more to make things better, to improve our situation. Sometimes we'll work ourselves crazy to improve our situation, and the situation still doesn't get better. But then we put undue stress on ourselves. Or sometimes we fail to recognize our own limits. I think I can relate to that one. Sometimes we feel like we're on our own. And have you ever felt that God has given up on you? Those are just some of the spiritual symptoms. On page 42, it said, it is normal to experience some of these symptoms. Look over where you put your check marks. How many did you check? Are your symptoms of stress primarily emotional, physical, or spiritual? Or are they a blend of the types of symptoms? If you are concerned with how many statements you've checked, you may need to evaluate how you are responding to the pressures in your life. You may also need to see a healthcare professional, counselor, and or a pastor to discuss the effects of stress in your life. The Bible says, what? A heart at peace gives life to the body. In Psalms 31, verse 9 through 13, that reads, "Be merciful to me, Lord, for I am in trouble. My eyes are tired from so much crying. I am completely worn out. I am exhausted by sorrow, and weeping has shortened my life. I am weak from all my troubles. Even my bones are wasting away. All my enemies, and especially my neighbors, treat me with contempt. Those who know me are afraid of me. When they see me in the street, they run away. Everyone has forgotten me as though I were dead. I am like something thrown away. I hear my enemies whispering. Terror is all around me. They are making plans against me, plotting to kill me." So it says that King David describes his stress in great detail. As you read this passage, make a list of symptoms and stress and burnout that David experienced. You don't have to do that right now, but you can do that in your own time. In Psalms 31, 14, verse 14, then verses 23 and 24, it says that David describes his response to his stress. What did he do, and what does he tell us to do with our stress? Lastly, what does God do for those experiencing stress? See verses 19 through 22. Right? And then the rest is just questions. It says, looking back on the stages of stress, describe how stress is used positively. What are some ways that stress can motivate people? We've already discussed that. We already talked about that. 2, when you're stressed, how does stress affect your relationship? How does stress affect your relationship? You know, it puts a strain on it, it does. You can ruin your relationship. Because sometimes when we're stressed, what do? We lash out to the person that's closest to us, right? We lash out to the person that's closest to us. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being very low, 10 being extremely high, how stressful is your life right now? And who can you talk to about your stress? A 5, a 5, okay. All right. Yeah, 1 the lowest, 10 the highest. 9.5. Yeah, it is. Yeah. And the last question, it says, is anyone in your life burned out or on the verge of burnout? Write down some practical ways you can reach out to that person this week. And that's the end of that chapter. This session 2.